Well, hi everybody, welcome to Afterburner. I'm Bill Whittle. There was another shooting on a military base a few days ago. This time it was Fort Hood, Texas once again. A soldier who'd been deployed to Iraq in 2011, but who apparently did not see any combat in his 4 months in country, killed 3 and wounded 16 before killing himself on the same premises that Army Major Nidal Hassan killed 13 and wounded 22 on back in November of 2009, while allegedly screaming Allahu Akbar in an event that the political establishment ruled was a workplace accident rather than a terrorist attack, with subsequent negative consequences to those injured and the families of those killed. And in between these 2 Fort Hood shootings, 12 more people were killed and 4 more wounded when a government contractor opened fire on unarmed warriors at a Navy yard in Washington, D.C. The Constitution of the United States of America is a construction manual designed to limit and define the powers of the federal government in order to protect the personal rights of its individual citizens. One of those rights is the right to self-defense. It's enshrined in the Second Amendment of the Bill of Rights. And since President Clinton ruled that military bases were to be gun-free zones, just think about that for a second. Then, the consequences of that order are pretty simple, as we've seen in 3 horrific shootings now, namely, the best trained, most courageous, and competent men and women we have as American citizens are required, not by the Constitution, but just by presidential fiat, to surrender their constitutional right to defend themselves in order to go to work defending the nation. I've personally known several of the deadliest, most decent men in the country who have concealed carry permits and who must surrender their weapons before they arrive on the base, put on the uniform of a person who volunteers to defend the rest of us with weapons. And when they write the epitaph of the descent into madness and moral inversion of the greatest bastion of freedom in the history of the world, they might just engraved, "They disarmed their warriors first," and you can just leave the rest of the monument blank. Because it's not just that base shootings are taking the lives of our defenders. The most recent Fort Hood shooter had a known history of mental illness. Major Hassan was a known sympathizer to al-Qaeda and the Islamic jihadist cause. Why were they allowed to continue to work until they killed soldiers who were not allowed to carry guns? Well, in the case of Major Hassan, it was political correctness pure and simple. Vocal Muslim activists have removed every reference to Islam, jihad, hudna, and all the rest from our operational manuals and insisted that to even ask about the loyalty of men openly sympathetic to our enemies in the killing of our people overseas, well, that's treasonous and it's un-American. If you do that kind of thing at home, ask those kind of questions. And in the latest case, it may be a simple lack of resources to treat the known mental illness that the shooter had been manifesting for quite some time. Now, when we say lack of resources, of course, we're talking about not finding enough money for counseling and treatment in a Pentagon budget that has paid not $167 billion for the 7 years delayed and still unflyable F-35 program. The F-35 program doesn't cost $167 billion. It's $167 billion over budget. The jets, which to many observers, such as myself, looks like a gold-plated replacement for the tried and true and effective and fully paid for A-10 Warthog, will end up costing about $160 million each. But we don't have the money to treat mentally ill soldiers, including the 22 per day, 22 per day. 22 armed services personnel killing themselves every single day in this country. No, we don't have the money to treat them. And apparently, when it comes time for Congress to decide whether it's going to either cut veterans' benefits or payment to illegal aliens, they made that same decision to disarm our warriors, at least psychologically, and make it crystal clear to every last one of them and their long-suffering families just where our national priorities lay. It lay with the illegal immigrants. And as these insults and horrors continue to combine and amass and reinforce each other, we're beginning to see now the full flower of what I can no longer pretend to be the unintentional consequences of the political correctness and morale-destroying policies of the last 5 years. Because policies requiring our best officers not to train their men, but to ask them if they have guns in their homes, and if so, how many, or to take precious training and operational time to examine each of their tattoos to see if they might be considered offensive to anyone or anybody anywhere, and then provide disciplinary action. Well, that kind of thing. That is defanging the most lethal fighting force in the world. And that's the real objective of these progressive policies in the end, isn't it, really? I mean, Vladimir Putin may rattle his rusty saber in the Crimea, but his gear is useless, his soldiers are largely alcoholics, and his supply ability is deplorable. Meanwhile, on this side of the freedom bubble, provided for us by the sacrifice of these men and women, the best equipment in the world and the most lethal, decent, capable, battle-hardened, combat-tested fighting force in the history of the world is being drawn down to pre-World War II levels, and much, much worse than that, their fighting spirit is being sapped by stupid, pointless, morale-destroying policies that are being foisted upon them in such force and numbers that huge volumes of irreplaceable field-grade officers, the majors and lieutenant colonels and colonels that earned their promotions from back when they were lieutenants and captains under fire in Iraq and Afghanistan, well, they're leaving the military and they're taking that experience won through blood and horror with them. And when they're asked, the next generation, the upcoming guys, the current company-level lieutenants, and especially the captains, the irreplaceable heart and soul of combat units, more and more just deciding to get out. It's just not worth it anymore. You see, it's one thing to ask men and women to face enemy bullets. It's another thing to ask them to face enemy bullets and then tell them that their retirement benefits have to be cut to protect payments to illegal aliens, or that we're cutting their training and supply and operational budgets without touching the standing army of politically useful civilian contractors, or because we can't afford their mental health care because we have to pay for a $340 billion gold-plated unflying jet that has a bunch of 3- and 4-star careers on the line. And then we send them surveys, by the way, when this is all over. And we essentially demand that they tick the little box that says all these things are just swell in order to provide cover for the political creatures in and out of uniform that are behind these horrors and disgraces. See this image that's been behind me the entire time? This is the combat infantryman badge. Now, if you know any soldiers personally, you know that among all of the medals and decorations, this is the one that matters the most. It's awarded to military personnel who perform their duty while personally under enemy fire. When the people that wear this are being forced out of the armed services because of the political whim of progressives and their policies, and the pursuit of weapons systems and gold stars at the expense of their mental health and their own lives, well, then we don't deserve these people anymore. And for this folly, this sin that we're committing, we will pay a price which is not only beyond payment, it's beyond imagining. And we're going to live to see it too. And if we keep this up, it's going to be among the last things that we ever live to see.